the technical isn't part of ours either.
Yeah.
Good thing nobody depends on us for technical advice, because we're
No,
really good at dating and relationship advice.
We're the talking heads, we're not the technical support.
Oh, there went my notification. Pooh. Oh, and here comes Gigi. Hello. Hello, everyone. This is the newsstreamingnetwork.com, WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, radio and TV and podcast #1 internet singles talk network. And this is Let's Talk Dating with Christine and Barry. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Christine.
So today we're going to talk about what's the difference between loving someone and being in love. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are kind of confused about that. What do you think, Barry?
I think true, because there's the assumptions that are made is the big thing. So we have this tendency in life as human beings to make assumptions about things, and particularly in relationship and in love. Well, that could be a whole other show on its own about the assumptions we make in love. But but in terms of the themes of loving someone versus being in love, there's a lot of things that people presume about either one, not realizing they're not the same and not knowing what the differences are and how to navigate that. So this could be a good little education for them.
I hope so, because, you think about when you feel loving feelings towards someone, you care about them, you feel close to them, they have your back, you feel so many connections, there can be a lot of chemistry happening, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're in love.
Right.
And the other thing I want to make sure we address in our time today is when people say, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. That's such a painful thing to have somebody say.
Yeah, I've been on the receiving end of that one a few times. And I've said it a few times, just to be clear, I'm guilty of it as well, just to be transparent. Yeah, the thing for me in this piece, and because the thing also is there's also the sense of loving someone who is just platonic and having that level of friendship. And it can be someone same sex even, because you're people you love, who you care about, not necessarily family, just friends and connections that you value and you trust, and you have, connection, you have trust, you have freedom with each other, which you may not have with other people, that makes you feel very loving towards them.
Yeah.
So definitely there's more than one little way to look at this.
Yeah. So here we are going to start back with who you are and what's important to you and liking someone. So if you think about becoming casual friends with somebody, that what do you like about them? What makes you feel comfortable with them? What makes you look forward to seeing them? What's the little pocket of your life that works with them, that makes your life better when you're with them? And, I've talked in the past about how I have this circle of friends, dating for friends is what I call it, to figure out everybody can't have access to your heart. There's people that you have in your life that you have for specific reasons. People that you can discuss business with, people that you can just go to the plays with, people that you have political leanings together, you have sporting events in common, you have children, healthy children with special needs. There's all these really interesting connections we can have with somebody else. And they stay on more of an outside circle if you only have this one connection, which means you're really close in this one way, but not necessarily close in other ways. Right. And that as you find more things in common and you move them into closer circles, you can certainly start having loving, caring feelings for them. And then it's really important to find out, is it reciprocated? Are you on the same circle in their life as they are in yours? And it's been fun to have those conversations with people to say, do this for yourself and then suggest it to somebody else and see where you are. Because it's not bad if you're on different circles, but it would be a problem if you assume, as you were saying, that you're on the same circle. Right. That you care more, that you're more invested than they are. And it's not helpful to go in denial about that, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because the term circles, in this sense, I'm thinking boundaries, which is not quite the same thing, but there's definitely a key part of this, which is when you're in love with somebody versus when you're loving someone, you're different qualification of boundary, meaning how much access they have to you, how much can they get inside of you, so to speak, energetically? Can they get in there and play with your emotions, sort of thing, or not? That sort of level of trust. So this conversation about loving someone versus being in love, we can definitely touch into different areas about trusting other people, about being trustworthy, about having good boundaries, about being respected, and those sort of things too, that can make or break your love for somebody and being loved by somebody else. So this is important to understand where you stand with them, for sure.
And the level of vulnerability, that's what you were seeing as well.
Yeah.
How vulnerable can you? Should you? Do you need to be? Because the people who say they walk around with their heart on their sleeve and they keep getting hurt, that's why they keep getting hurt,
Right.
because they're not using any vetting. They're not checking people out. Not necessarily to find if they're a bad person. I mean, you don't want to get involved with a bad person, but just that they're not at the same place as you are in the closeness, that they're not able to be honorable about how you're feeling. They aren't on the same wavelength. I mean, we're going to see that a lot this year with our political arena that's right now, that people can just get completely divisive over who you vote for or don't vote for. So that's why I'm saying that you need to figure out what it is that's important to you, and then ask, what's important to them, and see if you can be in at least the same zip code about it, or if you're in completely different places. And to take your heart and put it back inside where whoever made us made it, and put it behind this big old rib cage, that people have to prove themselves before they can have access to your heart. That you can certainly do casual things or be friends with them, and you can even care about them, but to not give them access to your most intimate feelings, your most precious feelings, until you found out that they'll be honoring about them and not take advantage because they're not a good person, or inadvertently step all over them because they're not the right person to share them with.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things I was going to say, because you mentioned about politics and that sort of thing as well, when there are things we have divisive or separate viewpoints on things with somebody else, doesn't necessarily mean you can't be around them. It just means that there's certain things you just don't talk about. So you can still have loving connection with somebody, friendship, however that is. You just know there's a part you just don't go in that room with them. Everyone else is fine. The rest of the house is fine to play, but just not that room. Because in that room, you get contentious, you get argumentative, you get separated, you get divisive. Whereas the rest of the house, so to speak, you get on very well with them. And I mean, in primary relationship, there's a challenge too, because there's definitely, I know several couples through my spiritual community where the spouse of the people I know in the community doesn't have the same spiritual beliefs they do. And part of me just sits thinking, and I do know, but part of me still goes, how do you maintain that vulnerability, openness, intimacy, and trust in relationship when you don't have a common ground in that area? And yes, I understand. And as I just said, that model, there's one room in the house you don't go into together, whereas the rest of the house you walk around in. Some areas or some parts of our lives are so much more important to us than other areas are. So how we dance that? It's a good question.
Oh boy, there we are. First, we figure out who we are, and then we have to figure out what's important to us. What is the highest priority that we need to be able to express to another person and have them at least have some common area of understanding? I mean, it's essential. And it is really interesting that I love how you talked about the rooms, because can you be with somebody who has a room in their physical, emotional, mental house that you don't go in together? And certainly that answer could be yes. And certainly that answer could be, geez, but that's a really important room to me. Like the spiritual one you brought up. Maybe the political one isn't, but the spiritual one, I have this spiritual part. But I've mentioned my friends that they were agnostic and atheist. And then he returned after a very long time back to his Christian Science roots. And he needed to have that conversation with her about, you don't need to be part of this, but I need to go do this. And they're fine, perfectly fine with it. But oh my gosh, I mean, there is a spiritual room that he'll talk about what happened when he went to church that day, and she listens, but that's it. I mean, she never goes. It's not important to her, and it's fine with him that she doesn't. But it doesn't feel like taboo. I think that's the other word we need to make sure it doesn't happen. That it's not like, oh my gosh, we can't talk about it because it's so wrong that you do this, instead of just different. Because I think that's a lot of what happens with the political part, is they think you're wrong with what you're doing that's different from them. Well, I think somebody who has a room in their house that you think is wrong would be a problem. That would be a deal breaker for me, for sure.
Well, that's the piece that we have to really know in some ways with our friendships as well as romantic relationships. What are our real priorities? What are, and we talk about green flags and red flags many times in our talks, but it's knowing what is vital to us and important to us that we must have in our lives, which means any partnership we have in relationship or just in friendships has to be included with that too. And it is true. I mean, like with my spiritual practice, I've been in for many, many years. I have a lot of friends of mine who don't share this like common ground. But going on dates, again, being on dating apps and going on dates, when I see in their profile that they're a fundamentalist Christian, well, first of all, I was raised Jewish, not Christian anyway, so I don't have any common ground with Christianity. So just on the bare bones, it's going to be an interesting conversation. But when it's that deep into that territory, that's an area where we will not have common ground. And it doesn't matter how sexy she is. For me personally, that part's important to me. And I can't ignore that for the sake of the great sex, for example. Maybe when I was younger, I could do that, but not now.
Isn't it interesting, as we get more mature, our priorities can really change about what we absolutely have to have or absolutely can't have, or, wow, it used to be a big thing and now it's not such a big thing anymore. Like, my friends with the religion thing, it's like, we've got this great life and great marriage, and no, it's not a big deal. But your spiritual practice has become even more important to you as you've matured. So if we acknowledge and honor, this is the thing I could have a conversation about and be a little flexible, and this is the thing where it's a deal breaker and deal maker for me. And I think what that shows is that we love ourselves. So first, if you can figure out what's the best way to love yourself and to think you're a really great person who you are, then you can have that conversation with another person to say, do you love yourself? Do you like yourself the way you are? And then what are the things that we have to just stay above that it's good enough line, where you can't have, this is a bad thing for me to have in my life. If you have this thing, it would be bad for me. Doesn't make you a bad person, just bad for me. And so you could still love that person. You could care about them. They could be important to you. But to fall in love with somebody who has something that's so wrong for you, that is definitely a dividing line in this conversation.
Oh, yeah. In fact, there's this comes under heading like kind of deal breakers in a way. That some of the stuff we're talking about here, we talked about many times in our show, just in case if somebody's watching or listening to this and wonders where they can find this, go look in the archives. They're all over the place. We talked about this topic. Yeah. And it is key in a way to choose. I mean, for me, it's almost like the relationships I have, the friendships I have, and any romantic relationships I have to be within a certain, I won't say container is the wrong word, but inclusivity about things that are important to me and important to them. Like, for example, I love science fiction, so I love going to see like sci-fi movies and everything else. But part doesn't want to go. That's okay, because I like going to some movies on my own anyway. Or with buddies of mine, I've got friends I go with all the time. Yeah. So if I'm in a relationship with somebody and she doesn't want to do that, that's totally fine. So it's like understanding there's definitely priorities or rates of importance we have in our lives, where something is much more fundamental we must have with our partner, or it doesn't work. Where some things are like, oh, that doesn't work with them, that's fine. Yeah. And the thing I was going to say also about the loving someone from a distance piece, I used to joke around with the saying, you can love everybody on the planet. Doesn't mean you have to like all of them. there is a sense of love you can have that is not disconnected, the wrong word, but it is detached as well, detached. So it's almost like unconditional love, but it's a sense you have love for that person, but you just don't want to spend time with them because you know what they're on about right now. And it may be just a period of time as well, because this has happened for me as well. It's the friends that I have deep love and respect for has gone underground for a while because they went into a different tangent in their lives, political beliefs, whatever it was. I mean, we went through the whole thing back during the pandemic of people who were anti-vax and also the Flat Earth Society, people who have beliefs about things that may not match. And I'm not going to decry which is right or wrong. What I'm aware of also is there are friends of mine who were so caught up in that position that I was not on the same page with them that we couldn't spend time together because that was so front of mind for them that they wouldn't talk about anything else. Yeah. So I had to learn and be okay with the fact that even though I did love them at that time, in that moment, I could love them from a distance and not be around them because I knew that we wouldn't have any common ground to talk about things. Now, on the other side of that, 'cause recently, one of my friends is back in LA again after they went off in their own, geographically as well. And I'm curious to catch up with them, even though I know the journey in between, we had no common ground. But it's that thing about the love sustain it over that journey, but it's more detached for a period of time. So that works too, in a sense.
Mhm. So important to keep checking in.
Hmm.
Maybe the thing that was working before or didn't work before might work now, and also to check in if the something was working and now it doesn't work. I mean,
Indeed, yes.
just be honest about it. And one of the key things that you touched on is I think it's imperative to, if you're going to say, gosh, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. I think a lot of the key parts that move people to being in love is that you have to really like them. You have to
Yes.
like who they are. You have to like what they stand for. You have to like how you feel with them. You have to like their energy, how your energies play together. And when I've had that conversation with people who have said, gosh, I love them a lot, but I wasn't in love or I fell out of love. And it often comes down to this key point of, well, how much did you like them? Talk about the things you liked and didn't like. And when they looked at it that way, the like scale had definitely decreased for a whole bunch of reasons.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's where we have to just keep paying attention throughout the time of getting to know somebody and considering maybe having a more permanent, romantic, intimate relationship. Do you like them? And do you continue to like them? And as you get to know them more, do you like them even more? I mean, that's the thing I kept saying about my late husband is even though I didn't have a physical attraction right away, I told my girlfriend on my way home from that first lunch, I like him. I like who he seems to be. I like what he said. I liked how I felt with him. I'm really looking forward to spending time with him. And every time I was with him, I liked him more. It
There you
was
go.
wild.
Yeah.
That hadn't happened to me very much in my life. And it was such a fun thing to happen and to have it happen that way without, for me personally, the chemical interference to just keep going, wow, this person, this who he is as a person was just like, I can't wait to see him again because of who he is as a person, not because I necessarily, and certainly in the beginning, wanted to jump his bones. And that was so interesting for me. So I look back and go, yeah, I need that. That's really important to me. I have to really like them.
Oh yeah. I mean that I know I can look back at my younger experiences and have a woman have looking back at relationships I had with women that were clearly I ignored certain things about what I wanted to have with them. I was there purely because it was physical. I mean, just to be
Uh-huh.
transparent,
Yeah,
or it's
yeah.
because I thought, or because I thought it was the right thing to do. There was sometimes that happened a lot of times where I I won't say program myself, but I convinced myself that being with this woman was a good idea, and then discovered how much I didn't like being with them, and it
Yep.
couldn't do it anymore. So the being in love thing is definitely about being in like as much as it is being in love, because there's something about that that gives it such joy to be there. Because the thing is, yes, it's fundamental for me, maybe not for other people, but definitely the same as for you. But I love being in a place where I like being with them. That
Yeah.
my life is more fun, more joyful, more enjoyable being around them, and I feel better. So that's a plus. But some people do choose relationships without that in place, which is kind of scary.
It is. And it doesn't work out very well for either people.
Generally not, no.
And having this piece kind of refined in your head, it certainly
Mhm.
helped me personally because I recently was having these wonderful conversations with this guy. I mean, I really enjoyed the conversations a lot, and they were long and interesting and, relationship based and Myers-Briggs and all this really fun stuff. And then but I started really paying more attention to him and the other pieces of him because this was such a big part. And I'm like, oh, I don't like who he is as much. I was so disappointed. I was
Yeah.
so disappointed. And it was interesting how excited, as much as I know, I tell people, but it's different because it's me. Just, I'm talking to my clients and I'm so level headed and not always about me. How carried away for a little bit I got because of this piece that was so me,
Yeah.
so what I need and desire in a relationship. And then it brought me back to ground, to my foundation of, oh, but there has to be this other piece, and it wasn't there. Yeah, we were both really disappointed, but I said, I just can't. I can't.
Well, that's the piece
Really
too.
key things about you I don't like. I don't like them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so the key piece of that is to be honest, because the thing is, we can sometimes try, again, like I did myself, convince myself I should do that because everything else is going great, so I can hide and pretend these things aren't happening.
Yeah.
But to be honest with yourself and say, you know what, this is all great, and this isn't working, so I have to say no. Yeah. And that's a loving act too, even though it's loving to move away from that person. It's a healthy thing to do because it's done out of caring and passion rather than resenting all the things that don't work all the time, because that's what doesn't work.
It
So
was
yeah.
a bummer.
Oh, I
I was
understand.
bummed because I don't find that as often as I'd like
Right.
somebody that wants to have that really great, who wasn't intimidated by what I do and was excited about it and wanted to have these, and had taken lots of classes and read lots of books and was very in tune with this. And then it was like, oh crap. Oh, well.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, and this is one thing we talked about this before as well in the show, about the incomplete list or having these things of what you want to have, and knowing it's like, but I've got 6 out of 10. Isn't that good enough? It's like, not necessarily. If those other 4 are important, no.
Depending on how much weight those other things carry, that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's not always the quantity on the list. It's the quality of each of the things. How
Absolutely.
much of a percentage is that you? How much does it count for you opening up and being caring and being admiring and liking them? Because I could never fall in love with somebody I don't like. It just wouldn't happen. It couldn't happen. And I think that that's the part where people get in denial when they finally go, oh, I'm not in love with them or you. Because, and we've both experienced both ways, it's happened to both of us. Yeah. We've done it and had it done to us. At least it's honest. But if you aren't really clear about it in the beginning, it can get too far. And that's the part that can be really hard for both people. And both people can get really discouraged and not want to ever try again because it was so hard and awful. So to really look at the paces and where is each step? What is it inside of you that makes you really like somebody? And then what does it do inside of you that makes you feel loving towards someone? And then making sure it's reciprocated, that they feel loving towards you. And then what is it going to take for you to be in love? And I know everybody says, I'll just know. I'll just know. Well, okay, that's good. I'm glad you're going to just know. But figure out how you'll just know. How will you feel when you're with them? How will you feel when you're not with them? How will you feel when you're expressing your opinions? How will you feel when they're expressing their opinions? I mean, there's so many levels to think about. And one of the telling things is if you're worried when you're not with them, because that is not being in love in the whole way that we're talking about. So many people, why aren't they calling? Are they out with somebody else? Well, that's not somebody to be in love with. And I can't imagine how they're in love with you if you're feeling this way. So that's one of the telling things. And people say, oh, I'm so in love. And I go, then why are you also worried? Have you not checked out if it's reciprocated? Do they really love you back? Maybe not. Maybe they do. And it's your insecurity that's getting in the way. So to look at what's the criteria, and it's so funny how people are, I really supposed to look at that? Do you want to stop getting your heart broken over and over? Yes. Because you and I, we hear this all the time about people get down the road and then they're so crushed. And we will say, yes, we didn't know all this in the beginning. And we've learned so much from our personal and professional experience. So that's why we're here to tell you. So if it's happened to you, this is how to start avoiding it or talk to us about it. And if you haven't had this happen, yay, this is how you prevent it, by looking at it each step of the way.
The thing is, so, I mean, in hindsight, is amusing and entertaining. Yeah. But it's those I want to say warning signs is the wrong word, but it's that things where you knew, part of you already knew this at the time, but you ignored it and you said, no, I'm not going to think about that. And you put it aside and still keep proceeding along, thinking it's going to work perfectly. Meanwhile, you're accumulating a big pile of these things on the side that are not working, but going, I'm just going to ignore that and keep going straight ahead. And it's something that I think, I mean, yes, I've done it myself when I was younger. but I'm really clear watching with my clients and with my audience in general is to give them the opportunity to face what they're choosing and really get them clear that they are responsible and they're no longer a victim. Because the other part also is some people do that is they get into a relationship and it's all going great, they think, but they're totally ignoring all these signs along the way, these voices inside saying that's wrong, that's not working, this is not that. And then they wonder why they've lost out. They cry victim going, it wasn't my fault. It's like, no, it wasn't necessarily your fault. It's your responsibility to be aware of what you were choosing.
Yep.
Big difference.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had a call before this with someone who we coached for a while. She's been in this really great relationship. I mean, really great, good for both of them. And they've worked through a couple of hard things. And this was the latest hard thing. And it's like, oh, how long has this been going on in your head? And it had been a while, and it had been the same little things, nothing big, but the same little thing had finally been the straw. And she said, I knew to call you before I said anything. It was so, I told her, I gave her a standing ovation for calling me. I did.
Absolutely. She deserved it.
Mm-hmm. And so we sorted it out. And
Mm-hmm.
there really ended up being three things because it's not usually one.
Right.
And so one turned out to be something that really wasn't a thing. She was just misunderstanding. And the other two were things she really needs to say something about, but we refrained how she could talk about it.
Yes.
And they really are in love. I think that they'll be together forever. They're the kind of people that won't get married for sure, you know, in the age group and the financial situation, but they really have a great relationship. And now she says, and that'll be even better.
Exactly.
Yeah. So checking in with yourself, and then the funny thing is she says, you know, I had to ask my friends. I said, and I said, what'd they say? Well, of course they gave me different advice than you do.
Of course.
Of course.
They don't have business cards like we do.
No.
Well,
and I said, the thing too is, this is something I've said a lot lately. Most people, because it's who they are, their advice is going to be 80% what's going on in their life, what they wish they had done, what they would do next, or what they hope would be different in their life. And maybe 20% or less has to do with what would be the best advice for you. And the thing about Barry and I is we sit here thinking, what is the best thing for you? And 100% what we give you as advice is 100% what's best for you. Whether it's a challenging thing we talk about or a soft thing we talk about, it's always best for you. So when you are doing this with a partner, it's a challenge to take yourself out of yourself sometimes and say, well, what would be the best way to talk to them? What would be the most loving way to talk to them? Can I muster that? Can I be loving to them? Can I get out of my own way a little? And I think that's another test of how your relationship really is with them. You know, can you feel? And so then the meetings that I suggest all the time, and you concur about what's the state of the relationship every week, that you have a conversation about what's working, what's not. And this couple had already been doing it, but this is something she hadn't brought up because I'm so glad she didn't. I was so proud of her.
Absolutely.
So that just keeps on top of it what is going on for you and not.
I want to add another piece to that, which is one of the challenges in this position is being willing to not be right.
Yeah.
So it's what he said, just brought it up for me. It's like the thing is when you want to bring something up to your partner, when you want to do it from a loving place, oftentimes we don't do it very well because we think we're attached to we're right, they're wrong. And so we don't actually spend time in the loving place. We get to the place of being righteous. And so part of this idea of being in love with somebody and actually in some ways it's both. It's like loving them and being in love with them is a place where you really go in a humble place to say, this is what I'm aware of. I'm not sure if it's something I need to work on, if it's something that we both need to work on, if it's something you need to work on. What do you think? Is much more centered and neutral and in fact more able to sustain the love. Because oftentimes in a relationship, what breaks people apart more times than I can count is where one partner believes they are right no matter what. Even though they don't act that way, but internally they carry this thing like, I know I'm right, and they're wrong. And there's no room to move. And so it doesn't matter how much love you think you have, your internal voice is denying you that possibility. So yeah, this idea about really having open communication and checking in and verifying that what you're aware of is something you can work on together is key to having a healthy, loving relationship.
Having to be right all the time. Dr. Tony Grant, who was on the radio in the 70s and 80s as a psychologist, used to tell women all the time, so do you want to be right or do you want to be loved? And you can't have both. And I recently was talking to a male client who seems to be getting into a really good relationship, but the one he'd had before when he was married, they'd even gone to marriage counseling and talked about a better way to negotiate some things. And at the end of the whole thing, this whole conversation for, 50 minutes, and they'd agree to stuff. And she said, but what if I'm still right? He said, I just kind of threw up my hands. Like, did you miss the whole point of the whole conversation?
Right.
So having to be right all the time is also could be telling about maybe you don't like the person enough or that you're not in love with them, because having some grace about other people have an opinion, even if it's different than yours, and accept that it's their opinion, even if it's different than yours, which doesn't make your opinion right, not for them, is very loving. I mean, that is a very loving gesture.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm funny. I'm feeling like caveat coming in on this one, because the thing is, there are certain times in relationships where we think that we're being loving by saying, you know what, you're right all the time. But you might have been the victim in that situation. So we're saying this in the context of not necessarily telling them they're always right, but not being attached to your own position of being right. You're simply saying, let me be centered and neutral and just see where this goes without being fixated on what the result I need to have to see where it goes. Because you may end up being in the position where you get the result you wanted. And maybe not. But the truth is, in the process of that, you still stay in love with the person you're with. And it's the challenge in relationships oftentimes. And, well, maybe it was just me, I don't know. But when I was younger, I've said this before in my talks about how my early dating life in the very early years, I was so caught up in the avoiding arguments at all costs that anytime an argument showed up, I'd fall out of love. So the love I had back then was so tenuous and so unstable because love could not weather the storm that would come up when there was an argument. And so part of what I teach in my work, because I had to learn this the hard way, is that when you can really have communication that is challenging, we can really have that argument in quotes and still be in love, is a journey I had to learn how to be, because it wasn't easy back as a kid, because I had no belief that you could have arguments and still be in love. That was the rules I had in my head as a kid. So understanding that being in love doesn't mean you can never have difference of opinion or arguments or upsets. In fact, when you love somebody and you are in love with them, you can hold a much bigger space for them to have that. So you can actually have such a difference that can perhaps seem insurmountable, especially if you don't have the love. But by holding that space, you can actually work through anything together when you really want to.
And I came out from the completely opposite direction to the same conclusion that, but if you really loved me, you'd really know this is right. This is right. Why can't you just see this is right? I mean, it shows me you don't love me if you don't think this is right. And I finally had to go hold the space where we could both be okay with what's going on for us. Oh, it's such a challenging lesson to learn from either direction, from the acquiescing or the aggressive side, that both is not an in love situation. It's just not. Yeah. Oh boy, that really brought back some memories when you were saying that, because I go, that was not me, but that was me.
Exactly. And I guess that's the point, is that this whole conversation about being in love with somebody and then loving them as well, is it sometimes means you got to transcend. Well, it does mean you got to transcend those old wirings, the beliefs, the rules that we carried that was so not what love was really about. It was just the way we were, I mean, we talked about in other shows about family dynamics and how we're raised and everything. But it's so interesting to look at when we are in a relationship or when we choose to jump into love and find out what that's like, how much of that's being played out from pre-recordings from what we had as a kid. And we're realizing that we're not actually loving the person anymore. We're just going through the motions because we were raised that way. So this conversation goes to a whole nother level, and you start saying, how do you consciously be in love with somebody? How do you consciously love that person? That's a higher level.
Yep, it's what you and I are looking for in our personal lives and have had and will have again, and
Yeah.
teaching our clients. And it's funny when you say that, because I've had a few people tell me lately that they're binging on our podcast, which is so cool. And they always look forward to us telling our personal stories. So here you get again. Here's our personal.
Yep. You're
Here we are
welcome.
being all transparent again.
Absolutely.
You
Hey.
crack it. That's one of my favorite things. I really like your advice, but I really like that you talk about your personal stories. Well, thank you so much. I'll tell Barry.
Thank
We'll
you.
just keep doing it because we had to learn the hard way. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. Absolutely. That's
Oh,
the key, is that we would, I mean, if we were teaching this work from theory and not having practiced or made mistakes along the way,
yeah.
it'll be hollow. So, so we have got stories. Oh yeah, absolutely.
We got so much depth going on because of that. I said, I've never asked you to do something I haven't already done at least 3 times or 12 times or
Exactly.
113 times.
Too true.
Yeah.
Too true.
And this
Yeah.
is such an important point because especially this age group, I'm finding they really want to be in love. It's really good incentive. They're doing the work because they want to be in love, because
Yeah.
they did love somebody and fell out of love. It's lots of them at this age that's happened to them. And they're like,
Mhm.
can I do it differently this time? And how do I do it differently this time? So this is the way to get started, is to just get very clear about how do you feel loved and how do you want to love somebody else? Because those really are the steps to be in love. I mean, you
Yeah.
have to like somebody, then you have to love all sorts of stuff about them, and then you will fall in love with them. And then it doesn't just stay. I mean, we talk about the work of keeping yourself in love with each other, even
Right.
when there's times when you get mad and frustrated,
Oh,
because it's not like nobody fights. It's just these are the tools to help you get through the fight. And often what happens is you're even stronger on the other side if you're still in love, if you still
yeah.
love this person, if you still like this person. Because the killer thing is when you stop liking somebody, then your respect goes down and that's it.
Oh yeah.
All can't be loving anymore.
Indeed. In fact, one thing you said I want to catch on, because it's something I've heard so many times about falling in love, and I have a personal thing about this. Is
Ugh,
people say, "Oh, they fall in love and they fall out of love."
yeah,
It's like, to be transparent, love doesn't actually work that way. If you
no.
fall in love with somebody, oftentimes it's self-convincing, or you're ODing on them in a way. It's like you're not actually really in love with them. You're oftentimes you're in love with the idea of who they are,
Yeah.
and that's where things go awry, because we have this sense of that person, but if we fall in love with the image or the perception of what we think about that person, when they show up with something different from that, we suddenly fall out of love. So understanding
Yeah.
that it really is clear, it's important to know if you know that person who they really are, or if you're under some perception that there's something else than who they really are as well. So this thing about falling in love, falling out of love, that's why I keep saying it's like when you are in love with somebody, I keep saying you are in love, or you're being in love, or you're choosing to be in love. It's not a accident. We just tripped over and fell in love with them, because that thing you trip out of it too.
It's the truth. And to just stay really current on finding out more about them, letting them see who you are, learn about yourself, and you share it with them, and then they share themselves about you, so that as each thing comes up, you're like, how do I feel about that? Do I need more information? Well, I really like that. Oh, I don't like that. Could I live with that? Is it still going to be good enough? I mean, that's really how it's supposed to happen. But when we get into that whole chemical thing, we don't ever have those kinds of conversations. And the people I know that are deeply in love and been deeply in love for a very long time and have had lots and lots of ups and downs, in their own coupledom and in their families and in their professional life, it's because they kept staying current. I mean, that's really the kicker. Stay current.
That's
Like my
my life.
client that called me today that finally had the straw. She says, all right, I
Mhm.
won't do that again. I said, call me sooner. In the air, just to
Well,
sound like a checkup.
that's the thing is, in a sense, what it is, it's like growing in love, because the real thing, the real joy of this work is when you start doing it from the point of view that you do your own work first, and then you also do your work whilst you're in the relationship, growing together and everything else. Because it is very tempting. Again, personal experience that taught me this. When you fall in love with somebody, it becomes like, I don't worry about anything else. I'm not going to deal with anything. I'm not going to eat. Not going to work. Not going to do anything. I'm going to be in love. Is that sort of mindset, which is not really functional. But when we start avoiding dealing with stuff that comes up, it's the same idea, is that we're avoiding things that are important to us so that we can stay in love, even by our fingernails, because we're not doing the work. So to face those things ourselves and do the work ourselves, and to be a willing student of our own life and of what relationships are about, is where the true joy of being in love can really thrive and happen. So do the work first, as I always say.
As we continue to say every time, because it's essential to do the work
Yes.
on your personal self, and then do the work and find somebody that's willing to do their work, and then that you
Absolutely.
can both work on the relationship. Because it's
Mhm.
these two people that are whole people that are now forming this third thing. So when you have this Venn diagram, how much do you overlap, that you've now created this third thing, the relationship, that needs just as much attention and nurturing and fact finding and archaeological digs about each other,
Oh,
and
yeah.
how are you in relationship, and what happens when we start falling in love and being in love with each other, and commingling our households. And the other conversation today was, I don't ever want to live with them. And I said, well, have you guys talked about it? She says, no. I said, well, I think it might be a good
You better do that. Yes.
because I know so many people right now, clients and friends, who are doing the living apart together, and they're so happy.
Mhm.
Everybody's happy that they can be together a lot, and they can go back to their separate places
Yeah.
and do their separate thing, and they still spend tons of time together. And
Mhm.
it's so cute because my neighbor and this client both live 4 miles apart. So how convenient is that, to be able to zoop back and forth to your house whenever you
Absolutely.
want?
Yeah. That works.
Yeah. And it doesn't have anything to do with how much they love each other. It doesn't have
Right.
anything to do with how much they enjoy their time. When you get to be this age, one of the ways that you can love yourself and then feel more loving to the other person is to honor, do you need alone time? Yes. I mean, do you want to go home and give yourself a facial and have scrambled eggs? Or do you want to sit around and smoke cigars for the evening and sit in your underwear? And that's not necessarily what you want to do in front of her. How nice to have the freedom to do that. And then there's
Indeed.
people that want to be together all the time, but you first have to decide, who are you and what works for you, and then have a conversation with the other person, what works for you, and how much time do you really want to spend together, and would you really want to blend your households? And I did that, and it was a lot of work. So
Mhm.
I don't know what I do next time. Well, I'll see, but I'll certainly have that conversation with the next person. But I thought that was so fun to have her go, oh, right. Oh, right. Good reminder. I'm going to talk about it. I go, yeah.
It's fun that we can just give that support to our clients with great ease, and because we know the lesson too. And the thing about it, actually, one PS before we wrap up, is that there's definitely, how to say this, is that we have this preconceived ideas about what being in love should look like too. And for some of us who maybe have learned that the view we had when we were 20 is different from when we were 40 or 50 or 60, is recognizing that the view has changed, and that's not right or wrong, it's just different. And so to look at what being in love looks like to us is sometimes good to update our own picture, because we have an illusion of what it used to be like, and it's not true anymore. So
Yep.
knowing that what being in love is might be separate houses, it might be separate bedrooms, it might be something, you don't know what it is. So
Mhm.
having a willingness to keep your self view up to date is a good thing to do. And having like you and I as the redecorators and the guides on that journey
I
can be a
love
gift.
that title.
Yeah. So
I received that title. That's so cool. And I do have a few friends. I only know a few friends who have separate bedrooms. They have
mhm.
great sex lives. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing not happening at their house. But one of them has rested leg, the other one snores. They're so much happier in the morning when both of them had a good night's sleep, especially after they are together and then they having a lovely time, and then they go off and sleep separate, and then they're in a much better mood in the morning.
Exactly.
So this is what's great about when you love yourself enough to find somebody that loves themselves enough that you can have these kinds of conversations. And that's what we believe being in love is.
Yes.
Does that just wrap it up with a nice bow, the two of
Definitely.
us?
Nice little bow.
Nice little bow. Okay, so
So
if this has been, you can relate to any of this. Is this any of this happened to you, or you don't want it to happen to you? Barry and I, as you can hear, have lived through it ourselves, and we'd be
oh yeah.
happy to coach you to have a better outcome for you, and have you feel We were talking in the beginning about how we're really good at this, but not so good at the technical stuff. We're really good at this, and
Indeed.
lots of other people aren't. So call us, and we'll be happy to talk you through this. So the best way to get a hold of me is through my website, which is www.theperfectcatch.com. And you can have a complimentary conversation with me by clicking on what's holding you back from love, and that will send you to my online calendar, and you can schedule a time that's convenient. You can also join my mailing list, and you'll get a repeat of this podcast, and I'll send you notes about other things I've been working on. And if you scroll to the bottom of the first page of my website, you'll see all my little social media icons, and you can just click on them to go to Facebook or LinkedIn or Pinterest or Twitter or YouTube or Instagram. I think that's all of them.
Yeah, maybe you said you did it. Yes, and make sure you did. You covered them all.
Got them all. And Gary, please tell people how to get a hold of you.
Well, as Christine said, we definitely have the resources and the experience of what doesn't work as well to help you with what you need to work through. So if you want to get in touch with me, my website is my name, which is barryselby.com. And similarly, on the top of the screen, there's a button that clicks on taking your next step. And on that link takes you to my calendar and a little form you can fill out that gives you a discovery session with me so we can see where you are and what we can help you navigate through. At the bottom of the screen on my website, the current one, has a link to join my email list, which you're welcome to do as well, where I do send out emails every week, including replays of the show and other things I'm working on and teaching. Also, if you want to know if you're ready for a relationship, I do have my quiz running, which is still on my website. Which you go to barryselby.com/quiz, and I'll give you all the things to do that. Thank you for the link being put up. If you're listening to the podcast, you got it verbally. That will give you a bunch of questions that can get you clear on where you are and what you're doing and what you may be what you might want to look at next. So it gives you some ideas. It's a good thing to start with. My social media is all my name, except which is certainly YouTube, Facebook is my name, which is Barry Selby on there, on LinkedIn, Pinterest, X, formerly Twitter, Threads. Excuse me, Threads isn't, because Threads is the same as Instagram, which is the real Barry Selby. But otherwise, you can find me there. But definitely go to my site. If you want to send me an email, you can send an email at barryselby.com. And basically, Christine and I have a lot of stuff to offer you. If you're passing up your chance to work with us, you're making a mistake. So check us out.
Yeah. And we are always here on Thursdays at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern, and all the times in between live. And you can also watch the replay on Roku and all the other streaming services. Or if you just want to listen to our sage advice, you can take us with you everywhere, to the gym and shopping or walking, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And we love for you to share our podcast with other people that are having challenges. People that are having challenges, and to like and to subscribe, and then to join us and tell us if you have any questions about things we've said, or if you have a topic you'd like us to cover. We've been doing this now for almost 3 years. Oh,
yeah, 150 episodes. Yeah, we've done quite a lot of these.
Yeah, we've done this for a while. So we're always looking for new subjects that are really hot in your mind about a question that you have about your relationship or the dating world. So please let us know. We're going to be here every week forever.
Indeed. So on that note, we'll see you again next week. So you take care of yourself.
Bye.
Bye.